Hi class, so today in math we're going to be talking about how we can find the area of combined rectangles. So in a previous lesson last week you guys learned how to find the area of one rectangle, but sometimes we can even find the area of multiple rectangles, and that also means including squares. So first let's talk about what are combined rectangles. So combined rectangles are when two or more rectangles or squares are touching and they kind of share sides. So we're going to learn about how we can find the area of both figures and then combine them to get a total area for both. So if you kind of take a look at this visual right here, you'll notice in this figure there's more than one rectangle combined. You see that? Because if you look down here, they separate the two rectangles that are made up here so that you can really see how there's completely two different rectangles here. So there's one here and one here. And see how when you combine them, when they're touching, they're creating this one figure. But if we calculate the area of each of these shapes that are making these rectangles, that by breaking them apart, we can then combine them to find the whole area of this whole figure. So we want to break them apart first to find these two separate areas in order to bring them back together to find a total area for the whole figure. So let's try an example together. Here we have a figure, and you'll notice that there's two areas being combined. One area is called the rose part of the garden, and this is the herb part of the garden. So the whole figure is representing a garden in general, the whole garden, but this section of the garden is only roses, and this section of the garden is only herbs. So what if I want to find the total amount of area that my garden is taking up? How much space is really here in this whole figure? In order to do that, we can find the area of just the rose garden, find the area of just the herb garden, and then add them together. So I want to also show you a visual of what my garden would look like using a grid paper, because in the previous lesson we talked about how area is the unit squared. So one thing I forgot to add in on the exit sub last time, which I'll probably do this time because I should have mentioned before, that when you do a label for area, it should really be square meters or square inches or whatever the unit is, because area is measured by units in the squares that take up that area. So for example, for the rose garden, I could count up all these units, all these little squares, and that's the total area. So that's one way to find the areas. You can count up all the little tiny squares, and you would call it square units. In this case, it's being measured in meters, so square meters. So that's one way we could find the area by counting. But for us being fourth graders and me wanting to challenge you guys, I'd rather you have use the multiplication strategy, especially because you don't always have the grid paper to count them. If you do, I mean, you can sit there and count every single one of these squares, but the quicker way would to be multiplication. So we learned in a previous lesson to find the area, we can multiply one side by the other side. So multiplying height times width, or we also called it length times width, means the same thing. So I can multiply 8 times 3, and that's going to give me the area of just the rose garden. So I want you to try that right now. Multiply 8 times 3 and get the area of just the rose garden. And if you want to use this grid paper, if you don't know 8 times 3, you can count all these little squares. You should get the same thing. So notice that look, this is 3, right? 3, and this side is 8, just like there's 8. So you can use the numbers or the grid paper. Pause this video if you need to. 8 times 3 to get the area of the rose garden in square meters. All right, so you should have done 8 times 3, and hopefully you got 24. But we're not done yet, right? Because that was only the area of the rose garden. We need to now find the area of the herb garden, and then eventually we're going to combine them. So you'll notice here that this says 4 meters, and look how there's a couple arrows. This is meant to help you to let you know that this side is 4 meters and also this side is 4 meters. So what do you notice about the herb garden? What kind of shape is it? Its length or height and its width are the same number. So what does that tell you? What kind of shape this is if they're the same length and size? You should be thinking, yeah, the herb garden is a square. So this one's obviously a rectangle, 8 by 3. This one's 4 by 4. It has the same length sides all the way around. Now you might be saying, but Miss Heath, it says 7 over here. Well, that's because the 7 is telling me the length of this entire side. That's including the rose garden and the herb garden, okay? So if I were measuring up to the dotted line right here, this part of this shape is 4 meters. And then if I added on this part, hey, look at what's that? 3, right? It's the same exact on both sides. We know that about a rectangle. 3 plus 4 is 7. So that's why this whole side is 7. But we don't need to use that 7 at all. Some of these numbers around here, we might not even need all of them, and that's okay. If I want to find the area of just the herb garden, I have to look at the sides of just that section of this figure. So the herb garden is this dotted line, this part of the line, this line, and this line. So to find the area, I can multiply 4 times 4. Again, height or length times width. 4 times 4 will give me the area of just this section of the figure. You can use the units here, you can count them, or if you know 4 times 4, that's awesome. So go ahead and pause the video if you need to count or do 4 times 4 to find the area of the herb garden. Okay, so you should have got 4 times 4 equals 16. So now we know the area of just the rose garden is 24, just the herb garden is 16. Now to find the area of the entire figure, both rectangles combined, we need to add them together. So we're going to add the areas, doing 24 plus 16, and for 24 plus 16, we should get the answer 40. So 24 square meters plus 16 square meters equals 40 square meters for the entire figure. Okay, so now I want you to try this out. I gave you a figure here, and I want you to try to find the area of the entire figure. I gave you some helpful hints up here of where you can start, because I know sometimes it gets really overwhelming when you see so many numbers. So my suggestion would be, let me see if I can write on this, that would be cool. Well, this is just a laser. But my suggestion would be to draw a line right here, a dotted line, just like in the other figure how I had that dotted line to separate them. If you draw a dotted line here, you can easily see this being one big rectangle right here, right? And then the other rectangle is right here, okay? So I gave you some helpful hints. The 3 times 4 is the area that I got for this rectangle. 3 is the width, 4 is the height. So 3 times 4 is the area of just this section. Then I also gave you 3 times 6, which is from here for this rectangle, right? The width is 6 inches and the height is 3 inches. So 3 times 6 will give you the area of just this section of the figure. You don't even have to worry about that 3 or that 7. Remember I said earlier, we don't always use all the numbers. You could have if you decide to cut it here instead, but I chose to cut it here. So either way, you can try it out. So do 3 times 4, 3 times 6, and then we're going to add those two answers together to get the area of the whole figure. So if you need to pause the video, pause it and solve. Okay, so for 3 times 4 and 3 times 6, you should have got 12 and 18. And then the last step would be to add 12 plus 18, and you should get 30 square inches as your final answer. 30 square inches. All right, so let's try this second one. We're going to again try to find the area of the entire figure by breaking this figure up into two different rectangles, finding the area of each, and then adding them together. So where I decided to cut this one was right here. I did a dotted line here. So you could do here as well. It's up to you if you want to look at it this way or this way. I decided to do this way. So then I said 2 times 3 for this rectangle because the width is 2, the height is 3. So 2 times 3 is going to give me the area of just this little section. And then do 6 times 7 to find the bigger rectangle in this figure, because you'll notice that the length of that whole part is 7, or the width is 7, and the height is 6. 6 times 7 will give you the area of this whole figure. Again, I don't need to worry about the 5. I don't need the 9. If I were to cut it this way, I would have needed them, but I don't because I'm cutting it this way. So go ahead and solve 2 times 3, 6 times 7, and then add those two answers together. You can pause the video if you need to pause. All right, so you should have done 2 times 3 and 6 times 7 and then added those together. So I got 2 times 3 equals 6, 6 times 7 equals 42, and then I combined them. 6 plus 42 equals 48. So my final answer should be 48 square meters. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have questions about finding combined areas, you know how to contact me. You can message me. Please try the exit slip that is attached to this lesson and the work on Think Central. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a great day and let me know if you need any help.